The rain hammered against our bedroom window like an unwelcome visitor demanding entry. I lay there in the darkness, listening to each drop assault the glass while my wife's side of the bed remained cold and empty. Again. Elise had been working late at the courthouse more often these past few months. At least, that's what she called it. I called it something else entirely, but I kept those thoughts to myself. For now. My name is Luke Harlan, and I've been married to Elise for 8 years. 8 years of what I thought was a decent life in our small New England town of Millbrook. I'm a contractor by trade, the kind of guy who fixes what's broken and builds what's needed. Elise works as a legal secretary at the county courthouse, swimming in the murky waters of small-town politics and legal maneuvering. The front door creaked open downstairs, followed by the familiar sound of heels clicking against hardwood. I glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Another late night at the office, apparently. I heard her fumbling around in the kitchen, probably making herself tea like she always did when she was wound up about something. The floorboards groaned as she climbed the stairs, each step deliberate and careful. "Luke, are you awake?" Her voice carried a strange mixture of exhaustion and excitement. "Hard to sleep with all that celebrating going on downstairs," I replied without opening my eyes. She paused in the doorway. Even in the darkness, I could feel her staring at me. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You tell me. You've been acting like you won the lottery every night this week." The mattress dipped as she sat on her side of the bed. "Something big happened today at work. Stephen got promoted." Stephen. There it was. The name that had been popping up in her conversations more and more lately. Stephen Corwin, the newly appointed regional judge. Funny thing about Stephen. I knew him from way back. We served together in the Army before I came home to start my contracting business. He was a nervous kid then, always looking for someone else to make the tough decisions. Apparently, some things never change. "Good for Stephen," I said, my voice flat. "He's going to be very influential now. Important connections, you know?" Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I finally opened my eyes and looked at her. Even in the dim light filtering through the curtains, I could see the flush in her cheeks, the way her eyes sparkled with something that definitely wasn't just professional pride. "Elise, are you having an affair?" The question hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. She didn't answer immediately, which told me everything I needed to know. "That's a horrible thing to accuse me of," she said finally. "It's a simple question with a simple answer." She stood up abruptly, her silhouette rigid against the window. "You know what, Luke? Maybe we need to talk about where this marriage is heading." I thought we were. "No, I mean really talk. About our future. About what's best for both of us." I sat up in bed, suddenly very awake. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Stephen has advised me about my options. Legal options." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Legal options? A divorce, Luke. And before you get any ideas about fighting it, you should know that Stephen has friends throughout the court system. Judges, prosecutors, police chiefs. If you try to make this difficult for me, if you try to contest anything or cause problems, well... She let the threat hang unfinished. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm informing you. There's a difference." Her voice had turned cold, calculating. This wasn't the woman I married. Or maybe it was, and I'd just been too blind to see it. "So that's it? 8 years of marriage, and you're just going to throw it away for some ambitious courthouse climber?" "Stephen is a federal judge now, Luke. He has power, influence, a future. What do you have? A pickup truck and a toolbox?" The contempt in her voice cut deeper than any knife could have. I'd heard that tone before, directed at other people. I never imagined I'd be on the receiving end of it. "I have integrity," I said quietly. She laughed. a sound like breaking glass. Integrity doesn't pay the bills or open doors. Stephen can offer me things you never could. Like what? A bigger house? A fancier car? Or just the thrill of trading up? Like security, like respect, like a real future instead of this small-town existence. I got out of bed and walked to the window, looking out at the storm that seemed to mirror the chaos erupting in our bedroom. So what happens now? Now you give me what I want in the divorce and we both move on with our lives. I keep the house, half your business, and my dignity intact. And if I don't? Then Stephen's friends in the prosecutor's office might take a closer look at some of your business practices, tax issues, permit violations, maybe even some domestic concerns if I were to report feeling threatened. I turned to face her, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw her clearly. Not as my wife, not as the woman I'd fallen in love with, but as what she really was, a predator who'd been biding her time, waiting for the right moment to strike. You've thought this through pretty carefully. I'm not stupid, Luke. I've been planning this for months. With Stephen's help, I assume. Stephen understands how these things work. He knows how to protect people he cares about. And how to destroy people he doesn't. She shrugged, as if my potential destruction was just a minor detail to be handled. That's up to you. Make this easy, and everyone walks away happy. I nodded slowly, as if considering her proposal. I need some time to think about it. You have until Friday. That's 3 days. And if I need more time, then you'll discover just how influential Stephen's connections really are. She grabbed her pillow and a blanket from the closet. I'll be sleeping in the guest room from now on, until this is resolved. After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty doorway. The storm outside was beginning to subside, but the one in my life was just getting started. I walked over to Elise's dresser and opened the top drawer, not really sure what I was looking for. Her jewelry box sat there, along with some old letters and photographs. Nothing particularly interesting. Then I noticed her coat draped over the chair by the window. It was soaked from the rain, and something was sticking out of the pocket. A small flash drive, the kind people use to transfer files between computers. I pulled it out and held it up to the light. It was unmarked, anonymous, probably just work documents, but something made me hesitate. Elise was usually very careful with courthouse materials. She never brought sensitive files home. I walked downstairs to my home office and powered up my computer. The flash drive contained dozens of files, audio recordings, text message screenshots, even some video clips. I opened the first audio file and heard Elise's voice clear as day. The divorce papers are ready. Once Luke signs them, we can be together openly. Stephen's voice responded, "What if he fights it?" "He won't. Not once he realizes what we have on him. You said your prosecutor friend could file charges based on my statement alone. Domestic intimidation, maybe some financial irregularities. Nothing that would stick long-term, but enough to ruin his reputation and his business." Perfect. He'll cave rather than risk everything he's built. I sat back in my chair, feeling a cold fury building in my chest. They weren't just planning to divorce me. They were planning to frame me, to destroy everything I'd worked for just to make their transition smoother. I continued listening to the recordings, each one revealing another layer of their conspiracy. They'd been meeting for months, planning every detail of my downfall. Stephen had promised to use his influence to fast-track the divorce and ensure that any legal troubles I might face would be handled by friendly judges. The final recording was the most damaging. "Once we're married, I'll have access to everything," Elise said. "The house, his business assets, even his military pension. Stephen, this is going to set us up for life. Just remember, if he gets suspicious or starts asking questions, we move to phase 2 immediately. The restraining order? That, plus the assault charges. I've already talked to Detective Morrison. He owes me a favor from that case last year. One call from me, and Luke spends the night in jail while we clean out the house." I turned off the recording and leaned back in my chair, So that was their game. They'd been planning to rob me blind and destroy my reputation in the process. Elise wasn't just leaving me for another man, she was orchestrating a complete character assassination. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. Stephen might be a judge now, but I'd known him when he was just a scared kid who couldn't make a decision without checking with his superiors first. I'd been his sergeant, his mentor, the guy who'd taught him how to survive in situations where hesitation could get you eliminated. Apparently, he'd forgotten some of those lessons. I spent the next 2 hours copying every file on that flash drive, storing them in multiple locations. Then, I started making a list of everyone I knew in town, everyone who might be useful in the coming confrontation. Elise thought she held all the cards, but she was about to learn that in small towns, information is currency, and I'd been making deposits for years. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of Elise moving around the kitchen. She was humming, actually humming, like she didn't have a care in the world, like she hadn't just threatened to destroy my life the night before. I came downstairs to find her dressed for work, looking perfectly composed and professional. She glanced up from her coffee with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning, Luke. Sleep well?" "Like a baby," I lied. "Good. I hope you've had time to think about our conversation last night." "Oh, I've been thinking about it all right." She nodded approvingly. "Smart. Stephen always said you were more practical than prideful." "Stephen said that, did he?" "Among other things." She gathered her purse and briefcase, checking her appearance in the hallway mirror. "I'll be working late again tonight. More transition meetings with Stephen's new staff." "I bet." She paused at the front door. "Luke, I hope you understand that this doesn't have to be unpleasant. We can handle this like adults." "Sure thing. Very adult." After she left, I called my nephew Tyler and asked him to come over. Tyler's 22, fresh out of college with a computer science degree, and he owes me a favor for helping him buy his first car. More importantly, he's got skills that could prove very useful. Tyler showed up an hour later, carrying his laptop bag and looking curious. "Uncle Luke, what's this about? You sounded pretty serious on the phone." "I need your help with a technical problem," I said, leading him into my office. "How good are you with data recovery and digital forensics?" His eyes lit up. "Pretty good. Why?" I handed him a copy of the flash drive I'd found. "I need you to tell me everything you can about these files, when they were created, where they came from, if there are any other copies floating around." Tyler plugged the drive into his laptop and started clicking through directories. "Uncle Luke, this is some pretty heavy stuff. Are you sure you want me involved in whatever this is?" "I'm sure. And Tyler? This stays between us." "Of course." He continued working, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Okay, this is interesting. These files were created on multiple devices over the past 6 months. Looks like someone was very careful to document everything." "Can you tell me what devices?" 2 different phones, a tablet, and at least 1 computer. The metadata shows they were all synced to the same cloud storage account." "Whose account?" Tyler pulled up another screen. "According to this, the account belongs to Elise Harlan. That's Aunt Elise, right?" "That's right." "Uncle Luke, are you and Aunt Elise having problems?" I sat down next to him and explained the situation, leaving out some of the more damaging details, but giving him enough context to understand what we were dealing with. Tyler listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as I talked. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "So they're planning to frame you?" "That's the plan." "And you want to stop them?" "I want to do more than stop them, Tyler. I want to make sure they never try something like this again." Tyler nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" "First, I need you to make sure these files are preserved and backed up in multiple locations. Second, I need you to see if you can access Elise's cloud account and find out what else she's been hiding." "That's technically illegal, Uncle Luke." So is conspiracy and fraud. Your choice. Tyler thought about it for another moment, then started typing again. Give me a few hours. I'll see what I can find. While Tyler worked his technical magic, I decided to do some old-fashioned intelligence gathering. I drove over to the VFW post where I'd been a member for 15 years. If you want to know what's really happening in a small town, you talk to the veterans. We've got connections everywhere, and we look out for each other. I found Eddie Martinez holding court at his usual table in the corner, regaling a couple of younger vets with stories about government conspiracies and cover-ups. Eddie's a good guy, but he sees plots and schemes everywhere he looks. Usually I just nod and smile when he gets going. Today, his paranoia might actually be useful. Luke, Eddie waved me over. Just the guy I wanted to see. You hear about all the weird stuff happening at the courthouse lately? What kind of weird stuff? Personnel changes, closed-door meetings, people getting promoted who shouldn't be. Something's going on over there. Like what? Eddie leaned in conspiratorially. Word is, they brought in some new judge from outside the district. Guy's got connections in the state capital, maybe even Washington. He's been meeting with all the local prosecutors and police brass. Stephen Corwin? That's the one. You know him? We served together. What else are you hearing? Rumor has it he's got some kind of agenda. Cleaning house, they call it. Getting rid of people who don't fit his vision of how things should run. I filed that information away for later use. Anyone else talking about this? Janice over at Murphy's Tavern. She hears everything that goes on in this town. You should talk to her. Murphy's Tavern was the kind of place where courthouse employees went to complain about their jobs and gossip about their co-workers. Janice Murphy had been running the place for 20 years, and she had a memory like a steel trap. I found her behind the bar, wiping down glasses and chatting with a couple of regulars. She looked up when I walked in and smiled. Luke Harlan, haven't seen you in here for a while. Been busy with work. How's business? Can't complain, though we've been getting a lot of courthouse people in here lately. They're all worked up about the new judge. Stephen Corwin? That's the one. Seems like he's got everyone walking on eggshells. She leaned across the bar and lowered her voice. Word is, he's been asking a lot of questions about local contractors and business owners, background checks, financial records, that sort of thing. Any idea why? Could be anything. Maybe he's looking to award some contracts. Maybe he's just being thorough. But between you and me, it feels more like he's building files on people. What kind of files? The kind that come in handy when you need leverage. I thanked Janice for the information and drove home, my mind racing. Stephen wasn't just helping Elise with our divorce. He was conducting some kind of investigation into local business owners, probably looking for ammunition to use against anyone who might oppose him. Tyler was still at my computer when I got back, but he looked up with excitement when I walked in. Uncle Luke, you need to see this. He turned the screen toward me, showing a series of text messages between Elise and someone named Renee. Who's Renee? According to her contact information, she works at the courthouse. Looks like she's been helping Aunt Elise with something. I read through the messages, feeling my anger build with each exchange. Renee. Got the forms you needed. Stephen's signature is already on them. Elise. Perfect. What about the other thing? Renee. Morrison's on board. One phone call and Luke spends the weekend in county lockup. Elise. Excellent. By the time he gets out, we'll have everything moved and the restraining order will be in place. Renee. You sure about this? Luke's got friends in town. Elise. Not the kind of friends who matter. Stephen's connections trump anything Luke can bring to the table. There's more, Tyler said, opening another file. Looks like they've been planning this for months. Bank account numbers, asset valuations, even a timeline for when they're going to make their move. I studied the documents Tyler had recovered. They'd been incredibly thorough, mapping out every aspect of my financial life, identifying vulnerabilities, and planning how to exploit them. But they'd also made a critical error. They documented everything, creating a paper trail that proved their conspiracy beyond any doubt. Tyler, I need you to package all of this information and create multiple backup copies. Can you do that? Already done. I've got copies stored in 3 different locations, plus a cloud backup that only you and I can access. Good. Now I need you to do something else. Can you monitor Elise's communications without her knowing? Tyler hesitated. That's definitely illegal, Uncle Luke. So is what she's planning to do to me. Look, I'm not asking you to do anything that could get you in serious trouble. But if she's planning to move against me, I need to know when it's coming. Tyler considered this for a moment, then nodded. I can set up some monitoring software that will alert us if certain keywords show up in her messages. Nothing too invasive, just enough to give you a heads up. Do it. While Tyler worked on the monitoring system, I sat down to plan my next move. Elise and Stephen thought they had me cornered, but they'd forgotten something important about small towns. Everybody knows everybody, and secrets don't stay secret for long. I started making a list of people who might be willing to help me, people who had their own reasons to dislike Stephen Corwin, or who owed me favors. The list was longer than I'd expected. My phone buzzed with a text message from Elise. Hope you're making the right decision. Time is running out. I typed back, don't worry, I'm making all the right decisions. She had no idea how right I was. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was in my workshop, pretending to work on a cabinet project while actually planning my next move, when Mrs. Kettering from next door came shuffling over with a plate of cookies and a concerned expression. Mrs. Kettering is 83 years old, sharp as a tack, and the neighborhood's unofficial intelligence network. Nothing happens on our street without her knowing about it, and she's got opinions about everything. Luke, dear, I hope you don't mind me saying, but there's been some strange activity around your house lately. I set down my sander and gave her my full attention. What kind of strange activity? Well, yesterday afternoon, while you were out, there was a man taking pictures of your house and your truck. Professional-looking fellow with a fancy camera. Did you recognize him? Never seen him before. But he spent about 20 minutes walking around your property, taking pictures from different angles. Then he got in a car with government plates and drove away. Government plates. That meant Stephen was already putting his plan into motion, probably building a case file to support whatever charges they were planning to file against me. Mrs. Kettering, did you happen to get a picture of this guy? She smiled and pulled out her phone. I may be old, but I'm not stupid. Got several good shots of him and his license plate. I looked at the photos. The man was middle-aged, wearing a suit, and carrying what looked like an official clipboard along with his camera. The license plate was clearly visible. You're a lifesaver, Mrs. Kettering. Just looking out for my neighbors. That wife of yours has been acting strange lately, too. Coming and going at all hours, talking on her phone in the driveway like she doesn't want to be overheard in the house. What kind of conversations? The kind where someone's planning something they don't want other people to know about. Last night she was out there for almost an hour, pacing back and forth, getting more and more agitated. This was valuable intelligence. If Elise was having heated conversations outside the house, it meant she was worried about something. Maybe their plan wasn't going as smoothly as they'd hoped. Mrs. Kettering, would you be willing to keep an eye on things for me? Just casual observation. Nothing dangerous. Honey, I've been watching this neighborhood for 40 years. I know how to be discreet. After Mrs. Kettering left, I called Tyler and asked him to run the license plate from the photos. Within an hour, he called back with the results. Uncle Luke, that car is registered to the state investigator's office. The guy taking pictures is probably building an evidence file for some kind of legal proceeding. Can you find out what kind of investigation? I can try, but that's going to require accessing some pretty secure databases. Do what you can, but don't take any unnecessary risks. My phone rang almost immediately after I hung up with Tyler. It was Eddie from the VFW. Luke, you need to get down here right now. There's something you need to hear. I drove over to the VFW post, where I found Eddie sitting with Janice from Murphy's Tavern and two other regulars I recognized from around town. "Tell him what you told me," Eddie said to Janice. Janice looked uncomfortable, but determined. "Luke, I probably shouldn't be sharing this, but I think you have a right to know. Your wife was in my bar last night with that new judge, Stephen Corwin." "They were together?" "Oh, they were together all right. Sitting in the back booth, holding hands, acting like a couple of teenagers, but that's not the worst part." I sat down and prepared myself for whatever was coming next. "They were talking about you, Luke, loud enough that half the bar could hear them. Elise was going on about how you'd been threatening her, how she was afraid for her safety. Stephen was reassuring her, telling her that he had everything under control." "What exactly did they say?" "Stephen said something about having enough evidence to put you away for a long time if you didn't cooperate. Elise laughed and said you were too stupid to see what was coming." The other regulars nodded in agreement. One of them, a guy named Pete who worked at the post office, spoke up. "Luke, I've known you for 15 years. You're not the kind of guy who threatens women or causes trouble, but these two were painting you as some kind of dangerous character." "They're setting you up," Eddie added. "Classic disinformation campaign. Get people talking, plant the right rumors, and by the time they make their move, everyone in town will believe their version of events." I thanked them for the warning and drove home, my mind working overtime. Elise and Stephen weren't just planning a legal ambush. They were conducting a propaganda campaign designed to isolate me and destroy my reputation before they struck. But they'd made a tactical error. They'd underestimated the loyalty of small-town relationships and the speed at which information travels in a close-knit community. I spent the rest of the day making phone calls and visiting people around town. By evening, I had a clearer picture of what I was dealing with and a plan for how to respond. Tyler called just as I was finishing dinner. "Uncle Luke, I've got good news and bad news." "Give me the bad news first." "The investigation file on you is pretty extensive. They've been building it for weeks. Financial records, background checks, interviews with people who know you." "And the good news?" "Most of the people they interviewed said positive things about you. The file actually makes you look pretty good, except for the statements from Elise and a couple of her friends." "What kind of statements?" "Accusations of verbal abuse, financial control, intimidation, the usual stuff you see in divorce cases where someone's trying to gain an advantage." "Can you get me copies of those files?" "I already have them." "But Uncle Luke, there's something else. According to the metadata, some of these documents were created before you and Aunt Elise even had your big fight." That stopped me cold. Before? Weeks before. They've been planning this for a long time. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen, staring at the wall. Elise hadn't decided to leave me for Stephen. She'd been planning to destroy me for months, maybe longer. Every conversation we'd had, every moment of apparent normalcy in our marriage, had been an act while she gathered ammunition to use against me. The front door opened, and Elise walked in, looking tired but satisfied. She glanced at me sitting at the kitchen table and smiled. "You look thoughtful, Luke. I hope that means you've been considering my proposal." "Oh, I've been thinking about it all right." "And?" "I've decided you're right about one thing. This situation needs to be resolved quickly." She looked pleased. "I'm glad you're being reasonable." "I've always been reasonable, Elise. It's one of my better qualities." She poured herself a glass of wine and sat down across from me. "So you'll sign the papers?" "I'll do what needs to be done." "Good. Stephen will be relieved. He was worried you might try to fight this." "Stephen doesn't know me as well as he thinks he does." "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. "It means that people change, Elise. The Luke you married 8 years ago might have rolled over and accepted this, but I'm not that guy anymore." She set down her wine glass, suddenly alert. "Luke, you're not thinking of doing anything stupid, are you?" "Define stupid." "You know what I mean. Stephen has connections, influence. If you try to cause problems, you'll only make things worse for yourself. I turned back to face her. Worse than losing everything I've worked for? Worse than being framed for crimes I didn't commit? Worse than having my reputation destroyed by people I trusted? Her face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You and Stephen have been very busy lately, building files, gathering evidence, lining up witnesses, very thorough work. Luke, you're scaring me. Am I? That's interesting, because according to your statement to the investigators, I've been scaring you for months. She stood up abruptly, backing toward the doorway. I think I should call Stephen. Go ahead. Tell him I said hello. Tell him his old sergeant is looking forward to their reunion. Elise grabbed her phone and practically ran upstairs. I could hear her voice through the ceiling, urgent and frightened, though I couldn't make out the words. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Stephen's name appeared on the caller ID. Hello, Stephen. How's the new job treating you? Luke, we need to talk. I'm listening. Elise is concerned that you might be planning to do something reckless. I want to remind you that any attempt to intimidate or threaten her will result in immediate legal consequences. Is that a threat, Stephen? It's a promise. I have the authority to issue warrants and the connections to make sure they're executed quickly. You always were good at making threats from a safe distance. Some things never change. Luke, I'm trying to help you here. Sign the papers, accept the settlement, and everyone walks away clean. Fight this, and you'll lose everything. I might lose everything anyway, at least this way. I go down swinging. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Luke, don't make me destroy you. You're welcome to try, Your Honor. But remember, I taught you everything you know about tactics and strategy. I didn't teach you everything I know. I hung up the phone and smiled for the first time in days. The war was officially declared. The next morning, I woke up to find Elise's car wouldn't start. She came storming back into the house, her face flushed with anger and frustration. My car is broken. That's unfortunate, I said, not looking up from my coffee. Luke, did you do something to my car? Why would you think that? Because you're angry about our conversation last night, and this seems like exactly the kind of petty revenge you'd pull. I finally looked up at her, keeping my expression neutral. Elise, I'm a contractor, not a mechanic. If your car won't start, maybe you should call a tow truck. She stared at me for a long moment, clearly trying to decide if I was lying. I need to get to work. Take my truck. I don't want to take your truck. Then call Stephen. I'm sure he'd be happy to give you a ride. Her face reddened even more. Fine, I'll call a cab. After she left, I walked out to look at her car. The problem was simple enough. I'd disconnected the battery cable, a 30-second fix that would cause exactly the kind of frustration I was looking for without doing any permanent damage. It was a small victory, but it sent a message. I wasn't going to be a passive victim in their little game. Tyler called around noon with an update on his monitoring activities. Uncle Luke, you need to know that Aunt Elise has been texting with Stephen and that Renee person almost constantly since last night. They're definitely planning something. What kind of something? From what I can piece together, they're moving up their timeline. Stephen wants to file for the restraining order today instead of waiting until Friday. Can they do that? If they claim there's an immediate threat, yeah. And based on these messages, that's exactly what they're planning to claim. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. If Stephen filed for an emergency restraining order, I could be kicked out of my own house and barred from my business premises within hours. Tyler, I need you to document everything they're saying and make sure it's backed up in multiple locations. Already on it. But, Uncle Luke, maybe you should talk to a lawyer. Lawyers take time and money, both of which are in short supply right now. I hung up and started making preparations. If they were going to move against me today, I needed to be ready. First, I drove to my bank and withdrew a substantial amount of cash, enough to keep me going for several weeks if my accounts got frozen. Then, I visited my safe deposit box and retrieved some important documents, including my military service records and some old photographs that might prove useful later. My final stop was Murphy's Tavern, where I found Janice setting up for the lunch crowd. "Luke, you look like a man with something on his mind." "Janice, I need a favor. If anyone comes around asking questions about me, I'd appreciate it if you'd let me know." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that usually come before someone gets arrested." She nodded grimly. "You think they're making their move?" "Today, probably within the next few hours." "What do you need me to do?" "Just keep your ears open. If you hear anything, call me immediately." I was driving home when my phone rang. Tyler's name appeared on the screen. "Uncle Luke, they're definitely moving today. I just intercepted a message from Stephen to someone at the sheriff's department. He's requesting immediate service of a restraining order." "How much time do I have?" "Maybe an hour, probably less." I turned around and drove to the VFW post, where I found Eddie and several other members having their usual afternoon discussion about the state of the world. "Eddie, I need to ask you guys a favor." "Name it." "In about an hour, the sheriff's department is going to serve me with a restraining order. It's bogus, but it's going to force me out of my house temporarily." "What do you need?" "Witnesses, people who can testify that I wasn't threatening or violent, that this whole thing is a setup." Eddie looked around the table at the other veterans. "You got it. What else?" "If anyone asks, I've been here all afternoon playing cards and minding my own business." "Consider it done." I spent the next 45 minutes at the VFW, making sure I was surrounded by reliable witnesses who could testify to my calm, non-threatening demeanor. When the sheriff's deputy finally arrived, I was in the middle of a friendly poker game, laughing at one of Eddie's stories. "Luke Harlan?" "That's me." "I have a court order for you, sir." I read through the restraining order, which accused me of verbal threats, intimidation, and creating a hostile environment for Elise. According to the document, I was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of her or our house for the next 10 days. "This is garbage," Eddie said, reading over my shoulder. "Maybe, but it's legal garbage," I replied. "Deputy, am I under arrest?" "No, sir. This is just a civil restraining order, but you do need to vacate the premises immediately." "I understand." I gathered my things and followed the deputy outside, where I found Stephen Corwin waiting by his car. He looked smug and satisfied, like a man who'd just won an important victory. "Hello, Luke." "Stephen, I tried to warn you. This could have been handled quietly, but you insisted on making it difficult." "This is just the opening move, Stephen. The game's far from over." "Actually, it is. By the time this restraining order expires, Elise will have filed for divorce, and you'll discover that fighting the system is a losing proposition." I walked closer to him, close enough that the deputy stepped forward nervously. "Stephen, you've forgotten something important about our time in the service." "What's that?" "I never lost a fight, not once." His smug expression faltered slightly. "This isn't the Army, Luke." "No, it's not. The Army had rules." I got in my truck and drove away, leaving Stephen standing there with a worried look on his face. The war was escalating, but I was far from defeated. I spent that night in a motel room on the edge of town, planning my final move. Tyler had continued monitoring Elise and Stephen's communications, and what he'd discovered was explosive. "Uncle Luke, you're not going to believe this. Try me. Remember that Renee person who works at the courthouse? She's been skimming money from the court's evidence fund. Stephen found out about it and has been using it as leverage to get her cooperation." "Can you prove it?" "I've got bank records, transaction logs, everything. But here's the really interesting part. Elise knew about it too, and she's been helping cover it up in exchange for Renee's help with your case." This was the break I'd been waiting for. Financial crimes involving court funds were federal offenses, the kind of charges that could destroy careers and send people to prison for years. "Tyler, I need you to package all of that evidence and prepare it for delivery to the FBI." "The FBI?" "Stephen thinks his local connections make him untouchable. Let's see how well those connections work against federal investigators. But first, I had one more move to make. The next evening was the monthly town council meeting, held in the high school auditorium. It was usually a boring affair, attended by a handful of civic-minded citizens and local business owners. But tonight was different. Tonight, the new regional judge was scheduled to give a presentation about courthouse modernization and community partnerships. I arrived early and took a seat in the back row, wearing a baseball cap and keeping a low profile. As the auditorium filled up, I recognized faces throughout the crowd. Eddie and several other veterans, Janice from the tavern, Mrs. Kettering and other neighbors, even some of my business clients. Stephen took the stage looking confident and polished, every inch the successful public servant. He launched into a prepared speech about transparency, justice, and community values. As your new regional judge, he said, I want to assure you that this courthouse will operate with the highest standards of integrity and professionalism. I waited until he opened the floor for questions, then stood up and raised my hand. Judge Corwin, I have a question about courthouse integrity. Stephen's face went white when he recognized my voice. I'm sorry, but this forum is for community members in good standing. I am a community member in good standing, Luke Harlan, local contractor and veteran. A murmur went through the crowd. Many of these people knew me, knew my work, knew my reputation. Mr. Harlan, I believe you're currently subject to a restraining order that prohibits you from... The restraining order prohibits me from approaching my wife, not from attending public meetings or asking questions of elected officials. Stephen looked trapped. He couldn't refuse to answer without appearing evasive, but he clearly didn't want to engage with me in a public forum. What's your question, Mr. Harlan? Judge Corwin, what's the penalty for courthouse employees who embezzle from evidence funds? The question hit the auditorium like a thunderbolt. Stephen's face went from white to red as conversations erupted throughout the crowd. I'm not sure what you're implying, but I'm not implying anything. I'm asking a direct question about federal sentencing guidelines for public corruption. Mr. Harlan, if you have specific allegations, there are proper channels. You mean like the FBI? Because I've already contacted them. Stephen stepped back from the microphone, clearly shaken. This is not the appropriate forum for... Judge Corwin, is it true that you've been using evidence of embezzlement to coerce cooperation from courthouse employees? That's absolutely false. Then you won't mind if the FBI examines the bank records I've provided them? The auditorium erupted in chaos. People were shouting questions, demanding answers, pulling out their phones to record the confrontation. Stephen tried to regain control, but the damage was done. I walked toward the exit, but stopped and turned back to the stage. Oh, and Stephen, you might want to call Elise. She's going to need a good lawyer. I left the auditorium and drove straight to the sheriff's department, where I turned myself in for violating the restraining order by attending the same public meeting as Stephen. You know this is just a formality, the desk sergeant said as he processed my paperwork. You'll be out in a few hours. I know, but I wanted to make sure I was here when the FBI arrives. The FBI? They should be here any minute to arrest a courthouse employee named Renee for embezzlement. Probably want to question Judge Corwin and my wife as potential co-conspirators. The sergeant looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but 20 minutes later, 3 federal agents walked through the door. By morning, the story was all over town. Renee had been arrested for stealing over $200,000 from the court's evidence fund. Stephen was under investigation for obstruction of justice and abuse of power. Elise had been questioned as a potential accomplice. The restraining order was dismissed when it came to light that it had been obtained through fraudulent statements. The divorce papers disappeared when Elise's credibility collapsed under federal scrutiny. I was sitting in Murphy's Tavern, enjoying a beer and the congratulations of my friends, when Tyler called with the final update. Uncle Luke, it's over. Stephen resigned from the bench this morning, and word is he's going to be indicted next week. Aunt Elise moved out of the house and is staying with her sister in another state. What about the evidence fund investigation? Renee is cooperating fully with the FBI. She's giving them everything she knows about Stephen and Elise's conspiracy. I hung up the phone and looked around the tavern at the faces of my friends and neighbors. These were good people, honest people who believed in fairness and justice. They'd supported me when I needed them most, and they'd seen through Elise and Stephen's lies when it mattered. Eddie raised his beer in a toast. To Luke Harlan, who proved that you can't con an honest man in an honest town. Everyone raised their glasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The war was over, and justice had prevailed. But as I sat there surrounded by friends, I couldn't help but think about Stephen's final words to me at the town meeting. He'd looked me in the eye and said, "This isn't over, Luke." Maybe he was right. Maybe it wasn't over. But for tonight, it was enough to know that I'd won this battle, and that sometimes, in small towns, where people know right from wrong, the good guys still finish first. I raised my glass with the others and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight belonged to justice, and that was exactly how I wanted it.